been talking about the opportunity in warehousing in East Africa, and quite clearly it's an amazing opportunity. And we've been talking to Richard Howe, the Managing Director of ALP, or Africa Logistics Properties Limited. And my name is Pius Moshire Mugo. Please stay tuned in as we discuss this opportunity. So, Richard, you've been focusing on warehousing.
Very much.
But I'm sure you are not blind to all the other opportunities or sectors within the real estate. The
Occasionally think about them, it's true.
You occasionally think about them.
Of course,
so
yeah.
How do you compare the warehousing or how do you describe these other traditional sectors?
Well, I mean, clearly residential, and you can tell from the government's emphasis on this, is a huge sector. In Kenya, in East Africa, throughout Africa, the demographics drive this. I mean, the requirement in terms of house building is massive. And I think there's a delicate balance going on, which I sort of observe from afar, between trying to introduce a sensible level of subsidy and government help in order to get affordable housing built in the right quantities that needs to be done. And it's interesting. It's an interesting space to watch.
Yeah.
And you see some people trying to innovate in terms of using prefabricated buildings and so on and so forth to drive down the construction costs and drive up construction speeds. And I think that's the right sort of approach to do. It requires a certain amount of patience and innovation at the front, but certainly, prefabricated sections to repetitive builds like modular housing is something that's well worth exploring and trying, because the numbers needed are huge. So, but I've watched Unity Homes, a building next to us at Tatu, and I mean those guys have really gone at it hard and seem to have a great deal of success. So it's clearly, there's clearly a lot to be done, and people are engaging on it.
Yeah.
Whether they're engaging at the right sort of numbers is something I can't really say.
Yeah. So, what do you think of the commercial real estate?
Well, I guess retail we look at quite closely because it sort of interfaces with our business is quite strongly. I think retail is exciting in Nairobi because I think you're seeing lots of things happen quite a lot at the same time.
Yeah.
I think so in the grocery sector, we've touched on this, you're beginning to see consolidation into major brands. Some of those are local brands, some of those are brands from overseas, which I think produces a good mix for consumers. I think consumers are, even in the short time I've been in Nairobi, I think consumers are served much better now than they were 3 years ago when I arrived. You certainly got a much broader mix of shops to choose from. You can certainly see that trend continuing. A lot of those companies have very ambitious plans for store openings. So I think you'll see a lot of consolidation in that sector. You see non-food retailers who desperately want to enter the market. I like the Decathlon store down at the Hub.
Yep.
It's the only one here, but I've spoken to them. I know they consider it a success, and they would love to do more of them.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see a lot more international retailers turning up.
Yeah.
And I think that will drive that market, and particularly where they're doing an offering which fits well with the local. I mean, I think Decathlon is a great fit for the East African market. Good value but reasonable quality sports equipment and hiking equipment. That's got to be a winner here.
Yeah.
So those sort of products.
Been taken there a couple of times by my sons.
I see. Right. Okay. Well, there you are. You're a convert already.
Yeah.
I think we expect to see, having seen it in other cities, and again, you see a lot of themes recurring, is what I would call big box retail. So you've got a lot of malls in Nairobi. Some people would say you've got too many. But for instance, at the waterfront, not very far from where we are here at Nairobi Garage, you'll see the first builder's merchant being built, which is essentially, when I say big box retail, it's essentially like a warehouse only as a shop.
I see.
So it's just one tenant, one retailer inside a big box selling a huge amount of stuff. And those sort of shops are very common in other countries who've gone a little bit further down the development road than Nairobi.
Yeah.
You tend to see them on orbital roads. They're not right in the city centre, but they're for sort of retailers who have an enormous amount of stuff, bulky goods, DIY being an obvious one. you've seen retailers like IKEA, for instance, went to my old haunt in Russia and absolutely cleaned up. It's, you know, because they built the right number of stores on those orbital roads and sold good value for money stock out of very large locations. So I think big box retail is interesting as those orbital roads develop. So I think lots is happening in retail.
In retail.
And I think you see lots of people desperately trying to raise their game. But I mean, I think, you know, as I said, even over a very short period of time, you can see big changes in retail in Nairobi.
Yeah. For new money seeking to invest in the real estate, where would you think the most attraction would be?
Well, they should definitely not do warehousing. Just leave that to us. So no, not that. I personally think big box retail has a lot to go for. Has a lot to go for it.
Like waterfront.
Yeah, like waterfront.
Yes.
But just standalone, simple value for money malls. I think on those orbital roads have a lot of this, because I think you've got a lot of very high-end malls. I mean, we talked a little bit about Two Rivers at one point. It's a great mall.
Yes.
But you know, clearly quite high-end retail, and then you've obviously got a lot of established low-end retail. For me, my observation on retail is a bit in the middle. In the middle. There's potentially a very large market,
which is where the waterfront would fall in.
It would, because I think Builders Merchant, although, you know, quality retailer, but they're going to be selling stuff which they'll sell to a very large target market. Yeah, and I mean, I think Decathlon, we talked about that. You know, if you want to buy Nike or Adidas kit, you can do that in Nairobi already, but it's not cheap, is it? So, but where there's the stuff in Decathlon, it's a great deal more affordable. So their target market is much greater than those one brand sports stores.
Yeah. So stay away from warehousing. leave warehousing to ALP.
Yeah. Absolutely. just move on to something else.
Big box.
Yeah. I mean,
big box.
There must be opportunities in residential, but I just don't understand that business well enough to tell somebody how to invest in it. It's it looks a really exciting market, and the potential must be huge.
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think high-end residential is quite well served in Nairobi already.
Yeah.
It's that bigger mid-market or low market that you can see, you know, must be huge potential. But I just don't understand enough of the economics of that business to understand how well it works.
It's definitely something if you look at our demographics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Saying 50% of the population is 15 years and below.
I know.
So every day you wake up,
absolutely,
half of the population is either going to school or they're left at home.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So think about 20 years from now.
All these people will need houses.
They will need houses.
You know, it sort of tells its own story, I think.
Absolutely. Let's talk about just the general landscape of real estate, the rental yields that you've been seeing around. What's been your observation as far as rental yields are concerned?
I mean, I think one of the difficulties, difficulties you face as a property developer in Nairobi and indeed in East Africa generally is that land values have traditionally been very high, and some people just see land as a sort of store of value rather than something which needs to be worked and so on and so forth. So sometimes when you're trying to make a commercial project, whatever it is, be it warehousing or imagine retail, and you go and you look at a piece of land, when you work out the sort of development appraisal which actually gets you to a reasonable rate of return at the end of it, you can't really justify some of the land values that are held in Nairobi.
Yeah. And the biggest impediment.
The biggest impediment, and so landowners are not encumbered with huge amounts of debt, and they're not in distress, so they're not forced to sell. So some of them take what I would call almost an emotive view on a piece of land, rather than perhaps face up to the fact that the underlying justification isn't there and sell it. They would just rather hold the piece of land.
Yeah.
And that makes life difficult if you're trying to do development. So that's an issue. I think
that is impacting on the rental yields.
Yeah, I think that's right. So it makes it very difficult to get
land prices.
Yeah, I think that's right. High land prices make it very difficult to get a decent rental yield to fall out at the end of the project after you've done all the hard work, really.
Yeah. And what about, just going out there, buying land for yourself versus what you guys did, go and into a master plan development?
Yeah,
plug and
I
play?
I think you need to be here. You need to a certain amount of experience, and you need to be patient. Because I think finding pieces of land in the right place at the right price that don't have any that have very clean title can actually be really quite difficult to do. And it is a time-consuming business. Now that our business is more mature and we have a bit more time and we weren't quite much as a rush as we were when we first arrived, you can take a slightly longer view looking at plots of land, and we do look at plots of land for both a potential third park or for the build-to-suit projects that we talk about. But it is quite tough to make the numbers work in terms of those pieces of land, really. So you need to be really careful about it. I'm certainly not here just to do it for the sake of doing it. It's got to make a decent yield at the end of the day.
Absolutely. What do you consider to be a decent yield?
You're at me again about this. I think, listen, you could go to the eastern half of the European Union, you could buy a warehouse there and make a 5% yield on that. If you're going to come to Africa and take property development risk and all the other risks that go with that, you've got to get above a 10%. 10% yield, 10% plus. Otherwise, you've got to question why you're doing it, really.
So the fact that you're here is proof that it's possible.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. If you're looking to invest in real estate in East Africa, sorry.
It's all right.
Warehousing is one of them. And big box retail, and I think someone needs to just wrap themselves around the opportunity in residential. There's a big opportunity. The population, the demographics just make sense that someone should carefully look at that opportunity in residential.